take a look now at doing a correction of an image that has a little bit of tilt to it. Now the situation for this set of images was, it was that Humber assignment where they have to do a daytime image and a nighttime image and a twilight image and combine them all together. So he had set up his camera on a tripod. Interestingly, there's no keystoning on that building, but it's a very tall building. Why is there no keystoning on that?
He's high up as well.
Yeah, he's from a building that's about the same height as this building. So he's not tilted up or down, he's looking straight across. So he got around the keystoning issues simply by elevating himself. But here's the thing, he set up the tripod, and just like when we were shooting the HDR, we talked about, make sure your tripod is stable. Don't set it on like grass or sand or something that's liable to shift. Don't hand hold. So he's had everything set up, nice and stable, and he walked around the camera for one of the shots and kicked the tripod. Now, if things do move a little bit, they can be realigned. Now, there is an auto-align feature in Photoshop where it'll try to look at it and align it for you. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. We're going to do this by eye, visually. So once you got it downloaded, open up these two files. If they're RAW files, so select them both, double-click, they'll open up in Camera Raw. Select both of these in Camera Raw, either a Command-A or from the little pop-up there, choose Select All. And you'll notice it'll change from Open Image to Open Images. So let's pop these both open. Now, just like the first semester, that guy in the jungle where we stacked it over and we darkened the background and stuff, let's take one of these images and stack it onto the other. It doesn't really matter which way you go. So I'm going to take one of these layers and stack it onto the other. What are some ways we could do that? If you're in windowed mode like this, I don't use the application frame because it annoys me. So I could just grab this layer here, drag it over, and let go. If you're in windowed mode though, here's another way you can do it. If we right click on the name background, we can choose Duplicate Layer, and it'll ask, well, where do you want that duplicate to go? We'll just choose the other document, and we'll hit OK. Looks like nothing happened, but if you look in the other document, there they are stacked on top of each other. Another way you could do it, you could select all, copy, and paste. Now we do the exact same thing with one slight difference. What would be the downside to doing Command-A, Command-C over the other document, and Command-V? Select all, copy, and paste. What does copying something do? Where does it put that information? Into your RAM, into your computer's clipboard, which is memory, which is RAM. So when you copy and paste stuff, you're actually using up a little bit of RAM. And in things like Word, copying a web address from here to there, you don't even notice it. But in Photoshop, Photoshop actually has a separate clipboard from the rest of the computer, and it can handle really huge stuff. So if I were to do select all, you get the marching ants around here, edit, copy, it would take all these pixels and pop them into RAM. And what happens when you run out of RAM? Yeah, you get a slow machine. So duplicating the layer bypasses that whole clipboard process. If you turn the layer off and on, you'll notice, oh man, look at that offset. What can we do to realign this? What can we do to see, first off, how much misalignment there is? How can we see both layers at the same time? If you drop the opacity of the layer, look at that. All right. Now, I want to bring this back into alignment. What sort of image information should I be looking at? Should I zoom in on the sky here and then move it around until the sky's in alignment? Or the trees, or what's a good thing to look for when we're trying to realign something? Ideally, horizontals and verticals. And if we look at the top left corner here, we've got some great horizontal areas. We've got these little chimneys up here. So let's zoom in on that area. Grab your Move tool, just hit V on the keyboard, and you can use the arrow keys to nudge it around. And if you've got a long way to go, if you hold the Shift key, it'll actually jump 10 pixels at a time. Normally it'll move 1 pixel at a time. With Shift, it'll jump 10 pixels at a time. And where you're trying to realign things, I find it's most accurate if you overshoot a little bit. Like if you look on the screen for a second, you notice that top edge looks a bit blurry. As I go down, it looks a little bit sharper. Now it looks really sharp. Oh, and then it gets blurry again. So I'll just go back 1 pixel until it's sharp again. So just kind of nudge back and forth until it's its sharpest look. Are we done? Well, once you've got that top corner in alignment, look around the image. Like go down to the bottom right corner, the diagonal opposite, basically as far away from that top left corner as you can get. And look at the little chimneys on that rooftop down there. Uh-oh, they're still out of alignment. What does that tell us? Well, there's more than just a lateral shift, isn't there? It's, we shifted the image up and over to match up that top left corner, but this is still out of alignment. Now we can get some information about the problem by what direction these are out of alignment. Look at this. If we take a look at these chimneys here, they're out of alignment in this direction. You can see that we're kind of going this way. That is perpendicular to where our in alignment area is. So what kind of correction do you think is needed to fix this? Rotation. If it had been out of alignment this direction, parallel to where our in area is, what would that suggest? Scale. So maybe your camera wasn't on autofocus, so it had locked onto some different part of the scene. Changing the focus can also, to a certain extent, change the scale of the image. Or maybe your aperture. You'd use your aperture to do different exposures. Changing the aperture can also affect slightly the scale of the image and the depth of field, the sharpness. Because it's going this way, we know that it's a rotation, so we're just going to do a rotate. And here's where we get to play around with the little center of rotation. So a fast way to get into rotation, instead of going edit, transform, rotate, is to simply do a Command T, which calls up your free transform. And then you can right-click inside this box here, and we can go to rotate. I mean, that being said, free transform will also let you rotate. Now here's the problem. The bottom part, okay, we can see it's out of alignment, so I'll rotate this. That looks pretty good-ish. It's not great, but uh-oh, this top corner went out of alignment. We had it in alignment, now it's out of alignment. What do we do to stop that corner from going out of alignment when we rotate this corner? Move the center of rotation, this little plus sign down here. If we move that onto something that we know is in perfect alignment, this is like a thumbtack. If you put two photographs on a bulletin board and you stuck a thumbtack through it, it'll have to rotate around that thumbtack. So by putting this thumbtack on the area that we know is in perfect alignment, we can then make our way down to the other corner and watch this. We can swing this around. It's rotating around that area that is in alignment, and when they're in alignment down here, hit return, bring the opacity back up, there's before, and there's after. There's the two images. So let's get those images into alignment, and then we'll talk about the next step. And don't forget to bring the opacity back up. Sometimes when everything's in perfect alignment, you don't notice that one layer is partly transparent. So bring that opacity back up to 100%. And the reason for that, we're actually going to do part of the assignment for this student here. They want the twilight sky and the properly lit building. Just take a look up on the screen here for a second. If you look at the lighter image where the building looks nice and kind of bright looking, the sky, not all that interesting, just kind of a regular sky looking sky. If we look at the other image, the sky has that nice kind of orangish on the horizon going to that nice blue up above, but the building, not quite so nice. There's a big shadow of another building across it. What do we need to do a proper job of blending this sky with this background? You'd use a layer mask. Yeah. Now you could try things like channel masking, quick select, but for something like this, I would actually just use the regular old paintbrush and shift clicking. I'm going to give this building here a layer mask, and I want to hide the building. Actually, I'm going to go the other way around. I'm going to put the light building on top, and I'm going to hide its sky. So I've put my light building on top, I'm going to give it a layer mask, and with a paintbrush, again, you want to match the softness of the edge. This brush is obviously too large. And again, I see people doing this even after we've talked about the idea of the appropriate size brush. If your brush is too soft or too large, if you don't get close enough to the building, you're going to have that little light fringe around the edge there. It's that light edge there. If you go too far, you get that scorch mark around the outside of the building. Or in this case, it's actually a difference in tone. We've got that warmer looking building. So you need to make sure you have an appropriately sized brush. And something like this seems to look pretty good. And you guys remember shift clicking. If I do a click over here, hold down the shift key and click, it jumps in between those areas. With a shift click, when you do a click and a shift click, it connects the lines in a very straight direction. So that makes it easy to get around things like rooftops, edge lines, and even curves. You can still use the shift click around curves, you just need to do smaller jumps. So let's cut out that building so we get that nice twilight sky and the daytime building. Yeah, like I said, you could try like a channel mask, you could try quick select. The thing about that, once you do it, you'll probably notice that, especially if there's a bit of a diagonal, these little aliased edges often get a very kind of jagged sort of look, or a slight fringing around the outside. Then you could try things like, under select, you could do the select and mask and try to do some auto stuff, but there's always going to be things you'll need to clean up here and there. The thing I like about this technique, where you go in and go through it section by section, it might take a little bit longer, and you know what, once you take into account cleaning up the fast techniques, sometimes it doesn't actually take longer, but because you're looking at every part of the image, you know that everything is coming out proper. There's no surprises. Sometimes you'll be flipping through a catalog, and there's this really fancy furniture catalog I was looking at in Montreal, and in the chandelier there were sections where they'd obviously missed stuff when they'd taken this exposure and combined with that, and there was like kind of like warmer tones in a really harsh cutout. It's like, how did you miss that? So with this, you're getting everything. I used to collect examples of bad Photoshop. I don't anymore. There's just too many of them. There's a website, I don't know if it's still out there, it was photoshopdisasters.blogspot.com, and it was like all these like really bad examples of Photoshop that have gotten into stuff. I completely ignored it. Sometimes with something like that, whether it's a little bit lighter or a little bit darker, you don't necessarily notice, but if you try to cut all the way around it, you get these weird jaggy edges. And guys, don't get too precise when you're doing these little transitions around here. One of the things you'll find if you're trying to combine new skies with different foregrounds is these areas outside of the image can just often be blended with a soft brush. One of the real problems you might encounter if you're trying to do multiple exposures of one building, you think, okay, well, there's nothing moving in the scene, I've got my tripod locked off. Trees. Trees and wind make for really bad friends when it comes to combining things together. You might think, oh, I got a perfect exposure for the inside lights, I got a perfect exposure for the building, but then there's a little bit of wind that's moving those trees. It can get really tough when you got to figure out, do I keep this tree from this layer or from that layer down below? Suddenly the colors don't match up. We'll take a look at a way of trying to match up tones once we finish the masking in here. So you see for mine, I basically just kind of did a straight line right out from the side, because that I'm going to do with a fairly soft brush anyway. Now if you do go the outlining route, first off, another reason that I did this straight line from the side out to the edge was you have to have a contiguous, a solid area around the top. So I've selected with this with the magic wand. Should I just fill this with black now, or is there something else that I need to do? Expand. You'll notice we got that fringe around there. We've gone through this on a few images. When we changed the color of that flower around the girl's neck, when we cut out that orchid to put it on the donut, because, orchid on donut, why not? We need to take that selection and expand it outwards. So select, modify, expand. In my case, I'm guessing at 3. That did it. And then I can just fill that with black. So there's mine. I've got the daytime building in the foreground, the twilight sky in the background. A harsh cut line, we'll deal with that in a few minutes. Okay, so guys, take a look on the screen for a second. The lighting on the sky, does the lighting on the building match what it would look like if it had this sky? Not really, does it? Like, this is a bit of a warmish sort of tone. This has a little bit of a cooler sort of tone. And in fact, if we look at what's left, I did a rough cutout here. So here's the daytime, and there's the twilight. What could I do to give this a bit of a warmer cast to match up with the sky out there? What if I used an adjustment layer? Like, say, I don't know, a levels. And then I said, well, okay, warmer, so maybe that's some yellow. So I go into the blue channel. I can give it some, maybe a little bit of magenta in there as well. Well, that's looking nice, except wait a minute, it's affecting the sky as well as the building. How do I make it affect only the building there? Clip it. Now I got a bit of a warmer looking building. So that's looking a little bit better in there. So play around with the tone, see if you can match the color. That's still not quite right, but I'll deal with that in a minute. Also, the masking that I did. Remember I did just a hard-edged layer mask across here. I need to do a little bit of softening on the edge there. So I'll make sure I have a totally soft brush. Actually, guys, take a look at the screen for a second. This is kind of fun. In combining the two different exposures, the dark sky and the light sky, I've got a boat here, no boat there. Remember I was saying how you can take multiple exposures and get rid of people in a scene? If I were to get rid of this boat, and let's say the two exposures were closer in brightness, now we have no boats. Now we have one boat on the left. Now we have two boats. So you can really kind of play around with and get either a really crowded place that, was fairly plain, make it fairly crowded, granted with a bunch of copies of the same people, or you can take a place that was fairly crowded and make it look completely empty. Now, one thing you might also notice, because there was some offset, because we had to move some of these, somewhere around the image, there will be, look at this, see this edge here? If you look around your image, you'll see where that offset was. You can simply crop that away. Just grab the crop tool and hack it out. Just make sure, guys, when you're using the crop tool and you don't want to resize the image, set it to width by height by resolution and click clear. Okay? Because if you've been using the crop tool to do your assignments to 5 by 7.5 at 300 pixels per inch, you will resize this image. But if you click clear, boink, you've given it no specific requirements for what size it needs to be. So you can then use it to simply clip off that edge there. There's before and there's after. So it just clips out that edge.